Hi, everyone. Welcome back. So today we've got an incredibly special guest, somebody who usually prefers to stay behind the scenes, shall we say, pulling the strings, making the big moves. But I've managed to drag him in for a conversation and straight into the spotlight for a change. So joining me today, none other than Felipe, the chief exec of Sparta, the man at the helm, steering the ship, and probably the one who signs off on all the good coffee in the office. Or is that Miles? So look, you've been leading Sparta through some really exciting changes, including our recent funding round, the continued growth. But look, beyond the boardroom and the balance sheets, you're somebody with some incredibly sharp insights, a very, very big vision, and I'm really looking forward to hearing the stories throughout this. So,
no,
Felipe.
You're making me extremely nervous now. Yeah.
No. So, Felipe, welcome. No pressure, but I'm expecting some top-level kind of CEO wisdom throughout this podcast. But look, why don't we just start from the start? Let's go right back to the beginning. What inspired you to start Sparta, and how has the vision kind of evolved since the founding of the business?
No, we definitely did not imagine we would be in this kind of situation now. When Miles and I, this is not the sort of aha moment where we had to stop trading because we had this idea and we needed to do it. But it was, but in a way, we got both tired of trading, if you want. We did it for many years, and it's a job that consumes a lot of your energy. And so we stopped trading, and then we started thinking about, what didn't we like about our jobs? What was the problem to be solved? And we found out that we had the same kind of problems. And so we thought of, okay, how can we solve these inefficiencies in the market? Yeah. And what started off with a bootstrap kind of, okay, let's see where it goes. Let's put a little bit of money, both of us. And on the gasoline market, let's solve what is the biggest problem is having this price discovery around the blender. And there's endless spreadsheets and PDF files and emails and things like that. So you're like, okay, let's solve this problem and then let's see where it goes. But in the back of our mind, we always had this idea that basically in a market like oil, where it's very volume intensive and it's very fast moving, the tools that we had were no longer the ones that we needed in order to perform our tasks. And the market was going 10 times faster. And this links to our sort of getting tired of trading, because we were both, we started with some tricks and we knew how to play the game.
Yeah.
And the game changed, and the tools that we had were no longer the ones that we needed to play that game. So, we thought that this would be the right way of doing it.
And goodness, it's grown from gasoline, that's for sure.
For sure, yeah.
So look, we've just secured you guys have just secured 42 million in a Series B. And the word on the street in IE Week this week is been extremely positive. But how does this investment kind of accelerate us going forward?
So the idea with investment is that ultimately investors, put money when they see a growth story. And the idea is to put more fuel to the fire. What do we want to do with this money is essentially outgrow oil, go outside of oil. And we're very excited about launching LNG at the end of this year. That would then lead to natural gas, who then leads to power. So basically covering the whole energy complex. And that's super exciting, particularly nowadays where there's so much uncertainty around the energy transition and what is going to be the energy of the future globally. And because it's not going to be the same in every region of the world, and being able to cover that is very exciting for us. The second thing is, we're in the age of AI, and AI is basically depending on a lot of data. And the industry, unfortunately, was running everything on Excel sheets, so no one was really storing data. So you have a lot of data on prices, historical prices, but not on outcomes, in terms of margins, landed prices, and, all the leading indicators. So we spend all of this time accumulating that data over the last 4 or 5 years. So we're now at the moment where we can actually start data mining and coming up with pattern recognition, predictions, signals on market based on historical pricing data. So that's very exciting, and we want to spend much more time around that. And finally, what we've noticed, and this is again coming back to the origins of Sparta, is that the market evolved. And we're no longer in this world where asymmetry of information was everything. And the perfect setup was to have a Refinitiv or a Bloomberg that would just feed you the futures, and that's it. You obviously have the news, but you would then build your whole working environment in a spreadsheet and individually. Now that has changed. Now before that would give you the power because you knew what was happening in the market. You were not sharing with anyone else, and no one else knew. But then, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, everything was available. Everyone knew what was happening in the market, and that asymmetry of information was no longer the power because everyone else had it. And it actually became the problem because now we're stuck with these sort of Excel sheets and all that. And you see it with every single one of our customers. Everyone is moving to data lakes and sharing and all that. But even in the incentive schemes, when I started trading at the time, it was individual P&Ls, individual bonuses. It didn't really matter if you shared or not information because you were paid on your performance. But then that changed, and it was now team performance and team bonuses. So that means that you need to share information. And we ended up constantly, every single one of us running our spreadsheets and then communicating about what we found in our spreadsheets. And we all found more or less the same thing, but we were all checking if that was the case. There has to be a better way.
There's definitely duplication there, right?
A lot of duplication. So ultimately, what we're seeing with every single one of our customers is they want a better workflow.
Yeah.
They want a system that is not just individually consumed, but actually where you have data coming in, it is, all of the calculations are running all the time, but you're able to, first of all, customize, which is something that you can do in Excel, but not on a tool. And secondly, be able to share the outputs. You want to be able to have a common dashboard. Everyone is sitting on a meeting room. You have the big screen with the dashboard with your own data, and that coming up to your own conclusions in an automated kind of way. And that's what people are looking for, and that's hopefully what we can provide.
Yeah, supporting workflows is critical. I mean, you touched on AI a little bit. I kind of want to delve into that a little bit deeper because the majority of companies band AI around quite fast and loose as a corporate strategy. Yeah. But what does that actually mean really for us? So I think in our press release even, we said that we wanted to transition from just a data provider and a workflow provider to that AI-driven data information. So what does that transition look like in practice for us?
So let's unpack that question because there's the AI element and then there's the, moving from a data vendor into a data platform.
Yeah.
And the data platform is what I was saying about the workflow. It's essentially, you're an operating system. That is where our hope is that we can be that operating system in the same way that you have your middle and back office, for operating systems to manage risk and things like that. Once the deal is done, the post-trade environment. But there isn't nothing in trading on the pre-trade environment where you can gather all the data, manipulate it, share it, communicate around it, and come up with conclusions. So on a pre-trade basis. So becoming that data platform is critical. And this allows you as well to build your own proprietary data sets because you are then inputting your own data. You're no longer doing it in Excel. And it's in the context of a workflow. So you're answering the immediate question of what do I need to do now? Yeah. And at the same time, storing your proprietary data sets as a company. So when I mean with AI, there's two, and then there's the AI element. And the AI element, there's two sides of it as well. First of all is the machine learning element, and that's what hedge funds have been doing for many, many years on equities, bonds, etc. And actually to a certain extent in nat gas, because historically there was a lot of information, particularly in the US. Yeah. So you see companies like Citadel performing extremely well because they had this history of data and they have been applying machine learning in order to come up with systematic trading opportunities. But in oil, we didn't really have that data. And now we're coming up because we have done the work of automating that workflow and storing the output data, whether it's blending margins, refining margins, arbitrage margins, etc. And ultimately, those are leading indicators into price action. Now we can actually look at patterns, and we have found patterns. And the idea for us is to provide examples so that people can then apply that in their own systematic trading opportunities. But also in the tool, we want to provide signals, alerts, and things like that, much more machine learning driven. Then there's the second part, which is the Gen AI section. And the Gen AI, essentially, well, it's most of what we provide is numbers, not so much text. But on the Gen AI, where we want to provide is first this Sparta Assist. So essentially a tool that will allow you to navigate the Sparta in the most efficient way and know where to find the information, sort of like your personal assistant within the tool. And then Sparta Copilot, which is what you're seeing in other industries, if you want, is the ability to communicate with this data set and to ask the right questions and to have someone that you can, spar ideas based on the information that we've seen. And this is something that seems like science fiction, but we believe that we can deliver something by the end of this year.
I'm very excited for that.
Yeah,
obviously,
Yeah,
I've got an
yeah,
inside track because I know what the roadmap looks like, but also kind of what you can see as well from some of our biggest customers out. When we've been talking to them this week, the whole kind of idea about AI and asking us kind of on Monday we were in a meeting. It's like, what is your AI strategy? And to be able to clearly tell people kind of that actually this is stuff that we're looking at is actually quite cool. So with that, I mean, we warehouse an incredible amount of data kind of here. So how do we ensure kind of the accuracy and the reliability kind of into that AI-driven insight? So,
well, it's the famous saying, the rubbish in, rubbish out.
Yeah.
So being able to, one of our key message, our key logo is trade with conviction. If we are providing rubbish out, then there's no conviction. And when we will run out of customers very quickly. And again, traders are not very forgiving. So if your tool is not working perfectly or it's not providing 10 to 30 times ROI, then they're gone. So we spend a lot of time. The first thing is we only partner with the best brokers in the market. That's the first thing, is to have the best, most accurate data. And best brokers does not mean the biggest one. Sometimes you want to go for the very niche broker in the med, one-man shop, but they provide the best numbers. And that's the first level of accuracy is taking those best suppliers of data. And we currently have like 25 of them and growing, as now they're approaching us because they want to be able to provide their numbers in our tool for visibility. So that's fantastic. And it was definitely the most difficult part when Miles and I started, just convincing brokers that we're not going to jeopardize their core business and they would have ability to monetize on their data. But we're now seeing that has worked and more people want to have their data in our tool. The second is cleaning, particularly on swaps and things like that. If you buy the data from these providers and you plot it into a chart, unfortunately, it's not the cleanest because, again, it's coming from manual input from brokers. And in the heat of the moment, they're not thinking about, is my number correct or not? They're just...
There's a human error.
There's a human error. So we've spent the better part of the last 3 years finding an algorithm that would clean automatically these fat fingers and outliers so that every number that we deliver is clean. Now, is it perfect? No, but definitely 10 times better than what anyone is doing outside in the market right now.
Yeah, the raw data is an interesting part to kind of look at. So look, I want to take this back to kind of our commodities strategy. Again, you touched upon moving into other commodities, but why do we want to do that now? So what's the most important piece for that?
So why now? I mean, obviously, we are now covering pretty much all of the oil barrel. We, as I said, the world is electrifying in a way. We don't really know what the next source of main energy is. I'm not a believer that oil is gone and it's over. I think that, we've seen with coal that consumption of coal has never been as high as now. So you're going to have a mix of energy sources in the future, and we want to be able to cover all of them. The idea is to move into pretty much finish with oil. I think the missing part is LPG. And then moving on into LNG, which is sort of natural because we're mostly looking at ARBs that are in vessels, and then going into natural gas pipelines, and then obviously that is the main driver of power prices. So having that just makes a lot of sense, and we were just recording the podcast and, we're thinking about diesel demand and that's now very much linked to gas demand. So you need to be able to cover all of those things. So it just makes a lot of sense for us to move into this.
Cool. And so there's uniqueness in every commodity market. I mean, you trade gasoline for many years, as well as miles and distillate as well. So when we've built out the Sparta platform, there are nuances to each of the commodities that we've kind of built out. So we've done everything from live blenders, we've done refined margins, we've got a blender on fuel oil as well. So how do we expect to scale that into kind of these different markets? Because they are traditionally different to kind of what we've seen so far.
For sure. I mean, let's unpack that. There's so many ways to answer that question. First of all, to a certain extent, everyone thinks they have a special sauce, when in reality, we all pretty much have the same sauce. And to how do we look at the market? How do we make decisions, whether it's supply and demand or calculating margins? the primary premise has always been, what is the job of the trader is to identify the gap between price and value. So some people say Sparta, oh, it's the blending tool, it's the ARB tool. Well, we're not really the blend. I mean, we're pretty agnostic into how do you find the value.
Yeah.
So the question is, what is the value driver? And in gasoline, it's mostly around blending and arbitrage, and crude is around refining margins. So that's what we do. We don't really care how you find the value. That we just look for it and try to provide it. And then the second part is, obviously, I have no idea about LNG or nat gas or power, and I don't pretend I do. But we try to team up with the best people that we can find in the market that, frankly speaking, and you're a good example of that, you recognize that there was a lot of inefficiencies. And even when you look at supply and demand balances, and everyone is looking at the same thing. And traders look at the market in a certain way. Analysts look at it in a very different way.
Very different.
And you and I have many debates about this.
We do.
And we will always have. And that's the beauty of it, is bringing together this holy grail of looking at the market from the supply and demand having an impact on price, but price having an impact on supply and demand. And being able to provide those is the holy grail. And if we, there's a lot of people there that find there's a lot of inefficiencies in the market, whether it's grains or metals or oil or natural gas, etc. And we will find people that were willing to support the cause and help us out building all of that. Yeah,
I think one of the really interesting things, kind of moving from my previous kind of places of work to here, and total credit to you, Mars, for this, is the amount of discovery that we do before we enter into kind of a new area as well. And this is literally spending hours and hours and hours with customers, potential customers as well, just really understanding kind of what their day role is, kind of what their workflow is, and how do we solve the gap there. So
I agree. And thanks for bringing it up, because it's one of our core values as well. Is always start with the customer, make your way backwards. I would say that we try to get obsessed with the problem, not the solution. It's so easy to fall in love with the solution. Oh, I thought about this. People are going to love it. And then you go to market and it's like, well, okay, thanks, but it doesn't really work for me. And again, we get it wrong. And we've launched products that didn't really work out as we hoped it would. And I can only guarantee we will get it wrong again in the future. But it's just a matter of always talking to the customer. Never, the assumptions is what kills companies. You don't want to assume that they will love it. You have to ask. And we're constantly asking. And even post-deal, we have a big customer success team that is constantly asking, what else can we do better? So it's a big driver.
Brilliant. Look, let's go back down to our core. We touched earlier upon kind of being a workflow provider, being an operating system. I've certainly spent a considerable amount of time kind of with customers, especially this week, but over the last couple of weeks as well. And I think there's an interest there about seeing us as a platform now and a replacement to kind of some people out there. So how do you see Sparta competing kind of against some of the platforms out there? So naming players like Bloomberg and Refinitivs.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a trader right now, you're not a trader if you don't have Bloomberg or Refinitiv or ICE. That's sort of the premise. Imagine you get a job as a trader and they say, oh yeah, but you don't have either one or the other. It's like, oh, I'm a second-class citizen.
And you're trading blind.
Yeah, you're trading blind. And so that was the sort of premise, and everyone, that's the belief. But when you think about it, you only get futures and news. Well, only, it's fantastic, fantastic tools. And, I've been using them 15 years and I love them. But in my day to day, I spend 3/4 of the time in my Excel and manipulating manually, copy pasting PDF files, etc. And God knows that every single company has now done a great job at automating, but it's still very Excel hack kind of basis, And it goes back to this idea that the market has changed and it's 10 times faster, and you're making decisions, you're shooting from the hip most of the times because you don't have time to run all of the calculations. And there's, one of the things that we provide is time to market. And it all goes down to focusing on what people are actually trading. I used to trade gasoline, and why is the only thing that I can follow on a chart basis futures from in New York when I'm trading Med or Asia? I want to be able to look at that in a chart. I want to be able to understand the dynamics between physical, paper, freight. That's my market. It's great to be able to know what's happening with bonds and equities and Bitcoin and all that. But, I can look at that on my own time on the internet, but having a tool that is dedicated to what I do is fantastic. Now, that was the first step. That's the first thing that we did that differentiated us. But that's not enough. What we need to do is adapt to this market. And again, the market is collaborative. People want to share. They want to override. They want to have their own numbers. So we provided that granularity. What we now need to provide is that customization so that you can put in your own numbers, override, create your own scenarios. You create your own digital twin of the market with your own view of it, and then share that in the team so that not everyone is like monkeys, running a spreadsheet and then talking to each other. What did you find? I found this, and now everyone can have a single platform where they can share, and you have the processing power that Sparta is running in the background, and come up with outputs in a very efficient kind of way. And at the same time, storing your own proprietary data, which is extremely beneficial.
No, I think kind of personalization of workflows is going to be really critical, because it's people's data that they're putting in, it's their trades and it's their risk that they're carrying. So, but look, you've just spent quite a lot of time on the road. You've been to Dubai, Singapore. You're over in London at the minute. So, what's been the feedback from the traders out on the street?
So most of what people tell us is... I had one guy who said that you saved my marriage, but I think he was exaggerating. No, but I would say time to market. The first thing is time to market is, as I said, the market is moving much faster than it used to be. And when there's a lot of FOMO, fear of missing out, and when a broker calls you, you don't want to miss on a deal. It's very frustrating. But at the same time, you want to do your due diligence and run the numbers and make sure that you have the conviction. So that's the first thing we gave is that element of conviction, that element of time to market, because it's not about saving time. Because if you give time to a trader, he will just spend more time on the pub. But it's much more around being able to see the opportunity, capture it, and then move on to the next one. And that's the first thing. The second one is access. That's the other thing. If you're in the US or you're in Singapore, you want to know what's happening. You don't work anymore in an isolated basis. What's happening in Asia is going to have an impact in what happens in Europe or US and vice versa. So you need to know what's happening everywhere in the world. The alternative is what? Hire a bunch of guys in another continent, get an office, get tanks. It's very expensive. I'm not saying that it's either Sparta or building an office. No, of course not. But if you want to get your foot on the water, test the water, that's maybe the best way of doing it. And we've seen a lot of examples where people. I remember when we started off with the AG blender in gasoline, we were like, but we can only update cash tips once a week. And a lot of people were saying, but that's already much better than what I already have right now. So giving me access to information is critical.
No, I completely agree. I think as well, that time zone piece, the amount of times that I've sat in big corporates, either waiting for the US to wake up or I've just missed the Singapore guys.
And by the time they wake up and they get to the meeting, they have a lot of things to cover.
They do.
You're not their priority. So they will only answer to you when it's maybe 6, 7 p.m.
Pretty much after close.
And then, so you're always like 2 or 3 days behind,
Yeah, very much so. So look, what do you think are the biggest obstacles that we've got in terms of future?
So one of the things that I see is that, I consider Sparta much more of like the next evolution or the new type of Bloombergs or the new type of Refinitivs in the sense that it's... Again, these tools were set up in order to power this information asymmetry. I give you the macro data for you to build your micro environment in your spreadsheet. But so it's the next evolution. I'm not saying it's better or worse. It's just different. And where instead of having an all-you-can-eat buffet with every single information in the world, we're just focusing on what you care most. That's the first premise. But when we go to market, a lot of people say, well, you're doing actually my job. My job is to run ARBs. My job is to run blends. And yes, but that's the means to an end. The end is, your job is to run the ARBs in order to have a view of the market and then decide on what to do. everyone that had a shower at some point had an idea. That's not complicated. It's actually, executing upon it. So once you come up with that trading idea, you need to execute.
Yeah.
Timing, you need to get the right timing.
Yeah.
You need to get in and out at the right time. Manage your risk. When you're losing $3 million overnight, then you're like, should I get in? Should I get out? Having that conviction is what we try to provide. So we're not necessarily competing with the user in terms of their role. We're supercharging them so that they have more conviction. But it is true that it is seen as a sort of like a resistance to change. If you've been trading in a certain way for many, many years, and even though everyone agrees that it's extremely manual and all that, you still have a lot of resistance to this kind of change. So again, we don't see us as a replacement. Oh, you're going to replace my job.
Yeah.
We're never going to replace that. And you see this with all kinds of equities and bonds and things like that. That market has become extremely efficient, and certainly margins have maybe reduced, but the volumes have increased tremendously. And this is a volume game. It's look at the trading companies generate 2% of gross margin. It's not this, but they move a lot of dollars. That's how they make a lot of money. So it's just about having more liquidity on swaps, on futures, on physical, being able to put bigger positions, and with the knowledge that you will be able to get out. Why? Because there's more people trading, because they have more conviction, they have more visibility, and that's essentially how we see the market. Going back to AI, if you have this systematic trading, right now equities and bonds are 70% of the market is bots, is robots, running based on systematic trading. Now, again, I'm not saying that we control all the data, but the data that we're providing allows for that. And we've seen it, and we have published a lot of white papers that demonstrate that there is a direct causality and correlation between the outputs that we generate and the price action. Now, this is maybe just the beginning, and we see more and more of that happening in the market, and that will just create more volume in the market. So
I think the tide's starting to change a little bit, because so I've been here 2 years kind of with Sparta this week, which is quite interesting.
It's 2 weeks?
So 2 years, yeah.
So 2 weeks, this week, I mean.
Yeah, this week,
Okay.
2 years. So it's been really interesting to see kind of not only how much we've grown kind of through the IP weeks, or IE weeks, I should say, but also how stressful IE week gets, because now we've got kind of a whole bunch of customers trying to chase us down to have
300
conversation.
people tonight.
I know it's going to be a really fun event. So I think sentiment's starting to change about that. And I think one of the big things kind of this week from my side is that the amount of people that have asked me about our fundraise.
Okay.
So we've definitely shifted from we know who Sparta is and we've been talking to you, to, oh my goodness, you guys have actually done a really big thing here. So just going back to kind of the funding round, just to close this out. So One Peak, tell me about kind of why do you think kind of they're the best funding partner for us, and what do you expect from that?
You want One Peak? Look, we met them at the time of the Series A, and we had immediately a lot of chemistry and connection. We were slightly smaller for them, so they were obviously the first people we called when we did the Series B, and it was just they immediately got it. They got the vision. They got, we're in commodity trading. We're not necessarily in life insurance. The market size is not that big. We're not in development tools. It's when you go and see a VC, there's not that many startups in our community, if you want. So they're not used to it, so they're all a bit weird. What is this company? What do they do? They don't. When we talk about contango backwardation, they don't even know anything about oil trading, of course. But they immediately got it. They saw the vision. They saw that there was this potential to disrupt the big incumbents. And you have some very, very big incumbents that haven't innovated that much over the last years.
Yeah.
They've had duopolies at most. And, why would you innovate? It's a cash cow. It's fantastic. And that's our job. Our job is to come up and poke a bit the bear and say, okay, let's dance and see if you can innovate as much as we can, And I think that's a healthy competition. I think that's it's good for the market. We're also changing the model in terms of pricing.
Yeah.
Everything was historically, per person. And by definition, that means that only certain people get it. Again, going back to this asymmetry of information being the number one rule. And now everyone says, no, we want to share. Okay, well, let's share. Let's change that model as well. We're moving into an enterprise model where you pay a fixed fee and everyone in the company can have access.
Yeah.
And price is the common language in commodity trading. It is what everyone needs. That is how people connect from middle office, back office, front office, analysts, it's all about the price. So having a single platform that delivers all of the prices and to everyone, and no longer just the traders, but the traders, the analysts, the risk managers, everyone can see the same information. It makes the company much more efficient. And again, we talked about margins being 2% on gross margins being 2% on trading. If you can get that 2% to 2.5%, 3%, imagine the profits that these companies would make just by being efficient. And so there's a lot of things that we're trying to innovate in terms of product, AI, work, thinking about the customer first and adapting to that new situation with the workflow, customization, but also pricing. So look, that's the role of a startup, is to poke the big bears and and get better service for the customers.
Well, I'm really looking forward to seeing kind of what we get done this year for sure, and even tonight actually, with all of our customers. But thank you very much. I've really enjoyed this. It's actually quite nice having you kind of in a different seat. And so thank you very much.
Thank you.